most of the people who had a lot of Bitcoin, they lost their Bitcoin. They sold their Bitcoin. Um, so I think it is a once in a generation thing, and even people who are deeply involved in it they all underestimated it. I think everybody underestimated it, and I think everybody's still continuously to underestimate it because, look, I think, and you think that Bitcoin is going to $1 million. Okay, if Bitcoin goes to $1 million, realistically, there's and I don't know what I'm going to do. Start a foundation or something. I don't know. But like, if this happens in the next 10 years, I'm not a person who needs really change my lifestyle. I'm not looking to change my lifestyle or anything. So, if this thing happens, I have more money than I can possibly have, and I don't need to do anything. I just need for that to happen, right? So the question is are we still on track for that event to happen? I would say everything that I see is that event is going to happen.
In this interview, Fred Krueger explains why Bitcoin is fundamentally unchangeable and why its design makes it the ultimate store of value. He delves into the inefficiencies of traditional finance, the power of mathematical certainty in Bitcoin's design, and why it is destined to become the world's primary way to store value. Fred also breaks down why Layer 2 solutions, faster block times, or scaling debates miss the point. Bitcoin already works perfectly as intended. Stick around until the end to hear why Fred believes Bitcoin will reshape the financial system and why those who understand it early stand to benefit the most. Also guys, if you like our cryptocurrency content, please remember to like and subscribe to stay up to date. Now, over to Fred.
They're going to have to lower interest rates to even make ends meet. So they're going to continue. The money printing will continue. And as rich people realize that Bitcoin's for real, they are going to switch to Bitcoin. And Bitcoin price is going to go up. It's a very simple equation. That's the equation. And in order for this thing to work, you don't need consumer. So this is where everybody gets it wrong. People are like, well, this thing doesn't feel right for the consumer. But you don't need it to feel right for the consumer, right? It doesn't matter because it's not Instagram, right? So people are like, well, these Bitcoin wallets are so much more complicated than Instagram. Yeah, it is. It doesn't matter. But an ETF is no more complicated than buying any stock. So you're looking at something, you're comparing the wrong thing. You should be comparing an ETF to another stock. They're apples to apples. An ETF to Instagram is apples to oranges. You can't compare those two things, right? And if you look, or a Bitcoin wallet. So I think the growth pattern here is going to be Bitcoin ETFs outperforming because rich people want to put their money in Bitcoin ETFs. That's the simple way it's going to work. And if you believing in Bitcoin, is the only thing you have to believe is, are rich people going to defend their assets? And the answer is yes, they will 100%, and they did in 1971 too. They bought gold in 1971. That's what they did. The minute they could buy gold, they did buy gold, right? And now in 2024, finally, this year is the first year that those same people could effectively buy Bitcoin. First year. So we are in the beginning of a multi-year market where the wealthy class, the top percent of the US, the top 1 to 5% of the US in terms of net worth, can buy Bitcoin. They're going to buy Bitcoin. Now, they're not all going to buy Bitcoin day one, but they're going to buy Bitcoin. And there's only a finite amount of Bitcoin, and the mining is irrelevant at this point. So it's going to go up. And that's what's, and there's no technological risk because people are not buying a technology. They're not buying an app. They're not using this thing through an app. There's no technology of sending it or anything. It doesn't matter. They're just buying it and holding it. So I think given that, people looking at it as a tech thing are wrong. They need to look at it just as a pure investment. And I think as a pure investment, it's going to do fantastic. And I think, I think it'll probably do pretty fantastic in the next 12 months is if I had to guess, I think it'll do. I think we're in that period where it's probably going to do really well.
Fred Krueger believes Bitcoin is set for massive adoption as wealthy investors seek a hedge against inflation. With governments printing more money, high net worth individuals will turn to Bitcoin just as they did with gold in 1971. The introduction of Bitcoin ETFs makes this shift even easier. Many misunderstand Bitcoin by comparing it to consumer apps, but Krueger argues it's a financial asset, not a tech product. Unlike Ethereum and other altcoins, which he sees as experimental, Bitcoin is complete and doesn't need upgrades, only adoption. As institutional money flows in, Krueger sees Bitcoin becoming the world's primary store of value, making now a critical time to pay attention.
Tax considerations aside, if I was starting out right now, I would buy an ETF because I just like the idea of somebody else worrying about holding the keys. I think that's a great way to go. But I think you have to have a very, very long-term approach to this. And you cannot look. You can look at it and you can follow it every day, but the only purpose of this is to strengthen your conviction and strengthen your, and I think that's the one thing we can convince people of is, okay, wait a second, this is not crazy. You're not completely insane by doing this. There's an actual fundamental reason why Bitcoin is going to be valued heavily in 5 years. Now, I can't say the same about Ethereum. I think there's some scenario that Ethereum is more or less worthless in 10 years. It's possible, right?
No, I have information from one of their developers. I was talking to him, and he was a kind of a much more reasonable guy in terms of realizing the limits of Bitcoin and Ethereum, both systems, and having a nuanced view, and not like other Ethereum maxis. But he was just telling me that while we're working on this code, we know that a lot of what we do is going to be either later moved to Bitcoin or obsolete in a few years. But it's just interesting, complex computer science problems that we love to work on, and we realize that this is not the safest system. It's more like experimentation, and that's not somewhere you really bet huge amounts of money on. I mean, if you wanna gamble or if you wanna test this, it's fine. But you have to realize this is experimental technology.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm a sucker for interesting problems, just like the next guy. But at the end of the day, I gotta ask myself, okay, is this thing going to contribute to? Is it going to contribute to me either reducing my Bitcoin exposure or increasing my Bitcoin exposure, or maybe somehow trading my Bitcoin? And so I even with something like the power law, right? So is there a model for some of these exponential bubbles? Maybe, maybe there is, but I don't plan on trading any of that stuff. I don't, is it interesting to me? It's marginally interesting, but I like to focus more on the power law itself, because the power law itself to me is fascinating. And I just don't want to get too caught up in these weeds, right? And you see these DeFi things. I saw this one woman, I can't remember her. She showed up in my Twitter feed. And she had this graph, and it was so complicated, and it was lending on Frax and Curve and this and that. She's like, I think I figured out this oracle of this, and this is how and it's just like, it's so complicated, right? And then you look at Bitcoin, which is one block every 10 minutes, one halvening every 4 years, adoption that is clear, finite cap. And it's just, to me, Bitcoin is just sort of mathematically beautiful. Like it's just everything about it is just the difficulty adjustment every 2 weeks. Like everything about it is perfect. I don't really think you can improve Bitcoin. Now you can add stuff with the ecosystem around it, layer twos and exchanges and stuff, but you can't improve Bitcoin. It's just not. It really is not improvable. I think it's not like a shorter block time. People have tried that. That's Litecoin, right? That's Litecoin right there. It's just like, this was a good choice. It's not like we need it to be faster. It doesn't need Caspa's faster, and it's a proof of work. Okay, it doesn't matter. The irrelevant. Fast is not needed. Scalable. Well, the fees. There may be some evolution of Bitcoin layer twos. I think Dan Moorhead said it the best. He's like, Bitcoin's going to work whether layer twos work or not. Now, if layer twos work and this stuff gets integrated into very seamless things that you can play video games and pay people in Bitcoin, that's great. But not necessary. It's not necessary. We do not need that to work, right? It's not like Bitcoin's going to fail if those things don't happen. Because, large purchases over $1,000, I don't make those large purchases every day. I don't. And if I have to pay $1 or $2 a fee to send somebody some Bitcoin, it works. It 100% works today. And so I think it's just a question of adoption. Now, a lot of people are like, take the view that, well, it's not interesting. Okay, it's a solved problem. I'm only interested in new things. And Raul Paula said this. He's like, I'm not interested in Bitcoin because yeah, sure, it works. But if you think of, yeah, it works and it's going to become the world money for the world, in the next 20 years, you should be very interested in it. You don't need to be interested in the fact that it's going to be changing. You just need to be interested in it. And that's what I think. I think Bitcoin is going to be, I think it's going to be the primary way that people on this planet store their value.
Fred Krueger makes it clear. Bitcoin is not just another cryptocurrency. It is the foundation of a new financial era. As governments continue printing money and institutional investors enter the space, Bitcoin's adoption accelerates. Unlike Ethereum and other altcoins, which remain experimental, Bitcoin stands firm as a complete and unchangeable asset. It doesn't need to evolve, it just needs more people to recognize its value. With the rise of Bitcoin ETFs, access has never been easier, and history suggests the wealthy will continue shifting their capital into it. Bitcoin isn't about hype or short-term speculation, it's about long-term financial security. The question isn't whether Bitcoin will succeed, but how long it will take for the world to fully embrace it. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please remember to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments section below.